Well, you're probably all wondering why this one particular guy is standing in the centre of the town on his own with a speaker box and speaking through a microphone. But I've been doing it for the last 4 years in this community in Bury St Edmunds, and it concerns me that we're living in a country controlled by criminals and crooks, and particular people on this board who are trying to hide the true crimes of criminality and paedophilia within Westminster and Parliament. And the main reason I'm sitting here and I'm standing here to speak on behalf of some very good friends that have had children taken from them from social services. Now, social services were put in place to look after and defend young children from abusive parents. But the state now have allowed social services to get involved with good families and taking good children out of the family homes. And they're using things like homeschooling as an excuse to rob your children from your home. If you're homeschooling your children now, they don't like that, the state. They prefer a child that's indoctrinated by the schooling system, like my son was when he was taught about masturbation and 72 genders and the transgender movement and the LGBTQ flag. All of these things the school teachers and the schools, not only in this town and around the country, are teaching our young innocent children. So if you're homeschooling your children, the state don't like this, so they deem you as an irresponsible parent, so they think they can come into the home and take your children away from you, like they did with many of my friends. And they're using other reasons also. Vaccination status. Now, if you've not had your children vaccinated recently from these COVID shots, the MMR, the HPV, the shingles and any other vaccination they've been pushing within the education system, they're looking at you as an irresponsible parent. So they believe it's in their right to take your children out of your home and remove them, and the state believe they have control on that because you haven't vaccinated your children. They believe that it's their right. Their right. And we're talking about COVID vaccinations that have taken many lives, including 3 of my good friends. Within the space of a few weeks of having a Pfizer shot, they died from a heart attack and cardiac arrest. But now they're forcing young children within the education system to take these unnecessary toxic drugs. And the HPV vaccine that they're now trying to push on the young girls and boys. Boys, a HPV vaccine. Why would a boy need a HPV vaccine when they don't have an ovary? But they're pushing this on within the education system on young innocent children, and a lot of these children are getting really ill straight after having this particular vaccine, and they're now pushing this in the education system now, the HPV one. My son was ordered to take it, even though I expressed my concerns over it and said no, and they tried to force him out of his classroom to take it, and obviously you can imagine I went schizo. I defended him because he's my son and I wouldn't allow him to have it. So when you've got teachers believing they have right over your children, they believe they deem it their responsibility to have your children vaccinated to HPV and the COVID and everything else, you have to ask yourself why the state are so insistent and using social services to take your children out of your home because of a vaccination status. Now, we can go in depth with this. It also involves your political stance on government also. So if you're someone like me who hasn't followed governmental regime, and that's what it is, it's a regime, it's a bit like the Nazi regime, when they dictated to the Jewish community, when they locked you down for a cough and a sneeze, they told you couldn't come out of your homes only once a day for exercise, when they told you had to close your businesses down, and let's all remember what they actually did, you know, They allowed McDonald's to stay open during the lockdown, but they closed the gym down, the place of fitness where you can keep fit. But they opened McDonald's and Burger King and all the fast food restaurants and joints and that, and they said that was okay. That was okay. So if you had a political stance and an opinion and a belief on government like I have, that's also what the state believe they have responsibility over your children. They can remove your children from your home because you're speaking out against the government. Now, they don't want your children to be enlightened, awakened. They don't want your children to be brave and strong enough to stand up against the system or the school teachers that are indoctrinating your children at school. They don't want them to think differently. They want them to all fold in line and do as they're told, just like every other child. And I won't have that, not for my children. My son's a strong-minded boy. He was strong enough to come home to me and tell me that the teacher was teaching him inappropriate subjects at school, including masturbation, 72 genders, pronouns, masturbation. The list goes on. These teachers are adults, and they believed it was their responsibility to teach our young innocent children that in the school system. And I was strong-minded enough as a father to go into the school and warn the other parents of this. Now, I was laughed at by a lot of people, and I don't really care. People can laugh at me all they like, but I know what I'm doing is right and true. I know I have a responsibility over my own children. I know they're my children. I'm their protector. God gave me them children to protect, God's children. But these adult teachers are deeming it's their responsibility to have our children in line, in check at school, teaching them these inappropriate subjects, and I won't stand for it. No child should be told that they can change the status, their biological status, from male and female to a bi-gender, a transgender, a cisgender, an animal, a cat, a dog. And these are the stupid things the schooling system are allowing our children to be taught at school. It went from an education to indoctrination. They're not learning anything at school, they're being sexualised at school, and it happened to my son. And the state are now getting involved with good parents, family homes, and having children ripped out of your care because they deem you as irresponsible. Yet these adults, some of them with no CBD checks, paedophiles, are teaching your children at school. And it's inappropriate, it's disgusting. Cheers, Bob. It's disgusting, and it's not right. And it's going to take us to stand up against the system to stop what's coming. The voice for the voiceless. Our children can't speak on their behalf, so it's down to the parents to make that decision whether we do the right thing or the wrong thing. And I'm going to stand for my children. I'm going to stand for those dear friends of mine that have had their children ripped out of their care because the state believe they have more control over your children than you do yourself. That's where the word parent come from. When they say pair, it's the mother and father, and when they say rent, they mean rental, that you're renting your child off the state. And we can all remember who Theresa May was when she was in charge in government. Her words were that she believes she has more right and say over your children than the parent themselves. So if she wants to take your children out of your care, she's doing it because she thinks that's the right thing to do, whether you think that or not. When you sign a birth certificate, they believe they rule over you and your children. So a lot of people will roll with it, accept it, until it affects you and you have your children taken out of your grip and out of your care from these 6 satanic paedophiles in Westminster and Parliament who run social services. And these children go disappearing, many of them, never to be seen again. Or they end up in the hands of other abusers, i.e. the other parent maybe the father was the abuser and the children were safer in the mother's care. But once taken away from the mother's care, they end up in the abuser's hands, which is the father, because the state think that's more responsible. So children are being pulled from pillar to post, don't know where they're going, frightened almost, like my good friend when she had her 2 children ripped out of her care at 12:30 at night because of her political gender, because she didn't believe in what the government was saying, because she didn't have her children vaccinated against COVID. They stormed her house at 12:30 at night and ripped her 2 children out of her care. Can you imagine how that must have felt for a young woman having her 2 children taken away from her? And you've got these scum rats on this board here, these perverts and paedophiles of Parliament, that are telling you they're not going to put an inquiry into grooming gangs. I wonder why they don't want to put an inquiry into grooming gangs, because if they do, it'll be seen that most of these perverts and paedophiles reside in their building in Westminster and Parliament. And that's the reason the state believe they have more control over your children, because they want your children for sexual gratification. Now, if you heard the story about the Yorkshire police officer who was done for 2 rape charges recently, the grooming gangs brought a young child, a young girl, to his care, to him, so he could abuse this child. The grooming gangs were giving the police officers these young children. And the grooming gangs are working in tandem with the government also. The government are working with these people. And I'm going to read out a list that I read out a few weeks ago of many of the names in Parliament that are involved in rape charges, because people are so insistent to believe the government have your best interests at heart. They believe that the social services are working on behalf of the interest of the child. Not anymore, they're not. They're taking children out of care of good parents like me, for instance, who are standing up for the community, for my people, and for the next generation, the children. Our children have no chance if people don't get their backs up for what the government have pushed you into in the last 4 years, when they locked you down for a cough and a sneeze and forced many of you to be vaccinated against COVID with an experimental toxic drug that killed most people. Millions of people have died because of it. But these same people, when they were telling you were going to be locked down for a cough and a sneeze, a lot of these have been done for rape charges. These Labour MPs, and some of them are Conservatives as well, and Reform Party. But I'm going to read out the list again, because it's important that we understand the people that are ruling over us and our country are the real paedophiles and perverts. So here goes. Brian Gate, Labour councillor and school governor for child welfare, caught downloading child pornography. Graham Pearson, Labour Lord Mayor, school teacher and nursery school governor, caught with child porn images. Richard Harris, Labour councillor, candidate and school governor, arrested for offering children money for sex. Ben Williams, Labour councillor and school teacher, arrested over child porn internet searches. Paul Diggett, Labour Party councillor, candidate and school governor, caught downloading child pornography. Cyril Smith was a Labour councillor and teacher at Cambridge House Boys Home in Rochdale before he joined the Liberals, and the council had depraved sexual acts upon little boys. Timothy Ameds, Labour Party organiser, Lord Mayor assistant, school teacher, helper and scout leader, child rapist. We're talking about grown adult men that are standing in the Houses of Parliament and Westminster who have been done for rape charges.